for smart, strong, successful women, and your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast. I'm in a good mood today. I hope you're in a good mood today. These episodes are now dropping on Wednesdays rather than Fridays, so I hope you've adjusted your calendar to know when to anticipate new material for me. There was nothing really wrong with Fridays, but we did a little bit of research. It turns out Wednesdays supposed to be better days for releasing podcasts. You can tell me if that's true or not. If you enjoy the Love You podcast, at the very top of this conversation, for some basic housekeeping, please give us a positive review. Please share this with a friend. Please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, so you get this content in your inbox regularly, or notifications of it regularly so you don't miss an episode. The thing I like about this podcast, at least at this juncture in time, because it is always subject to change, is that there's not too much filler on this podcast. We don't waste your time. Try to make sure each episode is to the point and gives quality advice, because I know you're a busy woman. I don't want to bog you down in unnecessary details and banter. Although that might change over time, because sometimes I get tired of doing everything all by myself, and I might want to talk to some more people coming up in the not so distant future. So for right now, enjoy the short form podcast that we're doing. So I put some thought into this one. I did a little bit of writing. So if you're watching on YouTube and you see me reading, please forgive me for that. But I've noticed a thing that's happened with a bunch of my clients, and the best part of coaching is that it allows me to share things that might be applying to you that you haven't seen before. So here are some real clients with some fake names, and here's what they're doing in their love life right now. And these are people who've already invested in themselves, committed to working with me for 6 months. Naomi hasn't filled out her E-Cyrano questionnaire. That's my profile writing service. So she's been with me, and she has not filled out her questionnaire so I could write her dating profile. Jamie was sent multiple professional photographers. It's part of the service that I provide, is getting people to rebrand themselves and attract more people online. So I pay for professional photography for private clients. Jamie keeps rejecting photographers, and she hasn't had her photos taken. Marilyn has been in therapy for 7 years and has been working with me, still hasn't gone on a date. Wanda goes on lots of women's retreats, but she hasn't had a boyfriend for over a decade. Rose listens to a ton of podcasts and YouTube channels that validate her experience as a woman and fears. And she is very acutely aware of how difficult it is to find a quality man in today's dating marketplace. So all of these women reached out for coaching, and this is where they are. They're largely stuck. Then we're going to talk about Barbara. Barbara, not her real name, has a guy who is interested in her. Right, this is her client. But somehow there's always a catch with Barbara. She doesn't like some line in his dating profile. Maybe he misspelled something. Maybe he didn't choose the right kind of restaurant. Maybe she couldn't quite tell if they were compatible based on their one phone conversation, or if they have enough in common. Most recently, she woke up feeling unwell on the day of the date, canceled the date, hasn't rescheduled. And so when I hear all of these stories about women who have reached out because they don't have the love they deserve, they don't have anybody who's taking care of them and supporting them, and they really, really want help, but they're kind of dragging their feet. So that brought to mind 3 different things that I want to share with you right now. When I say you don't even know you're doing this, my guess is a good portion of you listening to this, because at any given point in time, 40% of the people who are following me, maybe even more, aren't dating. At 20% are in relationships, 40% are dating, and 40% are kind of on a semi-permanent break from dating, but know they kind of have to get back out there, but are intimidated. So here's the 3 things that I can say about women who I've worked with who are feeling stuck. Number 1, when you're finding fault with guys, finding fault with every guy, dipping your toe in the water but not actually getting into the water, it might be a sign that you're completely correct about, let's just say, this guy that you're avoiding meeting, and your assessment of what's wrong with him is accurate. Number two, we could say it might be a sign that you don't really want to date, or you don't really want a relationship, and this is just protecting you and by remaining single. And then the third thing is, it's a sign that you might be somewhat avoidant, and we define avoidant as someone who genuinely wants a relationship and genuinely wants intimacy, but finds every excuse in the world to avoid online dating, meeting in person, sex, intimacy, and vulnerability. Right? It's the default mechanism to allow no one in, to allow no one to hurt you. And this is steeped in your past. Right? And there's nothing unusual about that, and there's no judgment around that. It is just an observation that if you were in my shoes and you listened to these stories all day long like I did, it would be almost an inevitable conclusion that any person who's listening to a dating coach's podcast, who has signed up for dating coaching, made the commitment to themselves, and is still not dating, right? That is because we have contradictory feelings and fears and mixed emotions. And when we have mixed emotions, our actions almost contradict each other. Yes, I want to fall in love. Yes, I want a life partner. Yes, I'll do anything to make it happen. And yet, I'm not going to set up a new dating profile. I'm not going to get online for a half hour a day. I'm not going to screen in and talk to a bunch of guys. I'm not going to do most of the things that you recommend as a dating coach. But I really want the result. And that's no different than I really want to lose weight, but I refuse to diet and I refuse to go to the gym, even though I signed up for the gym and I hired a personal trainer. We all collectively contradict ourselves all the time because of our fears, because we don't have anybody to nudge us along and hold our hand and support us. And so we all have this past. And the problem with the past is that it largely ends up dictating your future if you allow it to. If you indeed have gone 70 years, like one of my clients, without ever getting married, your default setting is going to be being alone, being independent, relying on yourself, right? Mostly not dating, focusing on your life, your hobbies, your career, right? Your friends, your travels. And that's good. As I said, I don't judge anybody who's spent 70 years alone. It's when someone spent 70 years alone and then claims to want to find love and then finds all these minute reasons as to why she can't. And can't becomes won't. I won't fill out your questionnaire. I won't hire the photographer. I won't get online. I won't continue this conversation with this guy because I'm always looking for a reason to not meet him. I'm always looking for a reason to disqualify him. Right? And that is fear-based. And of course you're afraid. If you are listening to this podcast and you are 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 and you're single, it means that every relationship you've ever had before hasn't worked. And if every relationship you have had before hasn't worked and caused heartbreak or pain or anxiety, very few people are trying to rush back to the source of the heartbreak, the pain, and the anxiety. Problem is, the heartbreak, the pain, and the anxiety has everything to do with your picker. The handful of men that you've chosen to invest in, the handful of men that you've been attracted to who aren't good partners, right? So if you've gone on, I had this conversation last night on a coaching call. It was a really interesting conversation. I wasn't planning on saying this, but I think it's relevant. I've got a really thoughtful client who asked deep, almost impossible to answer philosophical questions. If she's listening, she knows who she is, but she's a lovely woman in New York City. And we were talking about divorce and her. I don't know if she was asking for a friend or this was reflecting her attitude, but her take was, if you've been divorced, why ever get married again? Like that was her take. Why would any guy get married again? Why would any woman get married again if they tried it once and it didn't work? And I don't see things that way. If anything, if you got married and that marriage didn't work, what does that have to do with the next guy that you meet? How is that a reflection on marriage? It's like having a bad meal and giving up on food, right? Watching a mediocre movie and saying, I'm never watching another movie. Like, why would we assume that marriage as an institution is broken because you chose the wrong guy when you were 29 and you got divorced at 45? Like, what does it have to do with marriage? It has to do with the choice that you made in your 20s. Maybe out of insecurity, maybe out of fear, maybe out of attraction, maybe out of inertia. So most of our fears are rooted in our past. The idea that I don't want to get rejected, the idea that I don't want to get hurt, the idea that I don't want to settle, the idea that I don't want to be trapped in a relationship that's similar to relationships I've been in before. And I don't blame you. They're all very rational, right? The thing about advice or coaching is that people like me and other people who do something similar, it's our job to make sure you don't do that. So you don't have to let your fears run you, right? If you have someone that you trust, our job is to make sure that you don't end up in a place like that, which is why you could let go of your fears and you could trust and you could put yourself out there and you could try things, because going out with a guy that you don't like, great. So don't go out with him a second time. Oh, I'm texting with a guy who turns out to be a jerk. Okay, well, block him. All right? We're basically letting our fears dictate everything instead of realizing online dating doesn't mean you have to meet him in person. Dating someone doesn't mean you have to kiss him, commit to him, sleep with him, marry him. These are all steps in a longer continuum. So if we let our fears paralyze us at the beginning, where we don't even get into the flow of dating, because there's always a reason to be afraid and to dissect every guy, every behavior, and not wade into the water and at least start to swim, well, then it's analysis paralysis, and it leaves us in a place where what I call safe solitude. Safe solitude is being alone, continuing on your path of independence, work, friends, travel, no love, no men, all right? But at least no one's going to break your heart. No one's going to abandon you. No one's going to reject you. No one could possibly hurt you if you don't date. Right? It's airtight. It's perfect. And that's where a lot of people choose to stay. Consciously or unconsciously, they choose to stay. And I'm only bringing this up in that a lot of times I think it's unconscious, because I know they're reaching out to me because they actually want a man to love them unconditionally. And there's so much background, there's so much fear that keeps people on the tarmac instead of taking off and allowing their love life to take flight. They're weighed down by the baggage of their past. Right? Safe solitude is fine if you're content being alone for the rest of your life. And as I said, as a dating coach who's dated a lot and is happily married, there's not one way to live life. There's nothing wrong with being alone. None. My presumption is, if you're listening, is because you want more than that, and you haven't figured out how to get it. So the answer is to take action. The answer is to not let your fears run you. Right? The past does not have to have anything to do with the future. Right? You could reinvent yourself anytime without having to change your personality. Right? The big message of Love You is you don't have to change to find love. You do have to change your choice of men. You might have to change your methodology for how you're dating and the kind of guys you choose. But you don't have to be different. You don't have to have a full makeover. You don't have to have a personality-ectomy to find love. There's a guy on this planet who has no idea you exist. And he can't have an idea you exist if you always find a reason to avoid online dating, engaging with men, starting conversations, exploring possibilities. So, does this apply to you? Are you the person who claims to want love, who's tired of being alone, who's tired of taking on the burden of life all by yourself and can't bring yourself to get to the other side? If so, stick with me. That's what I'm here for. Love You podcast is free advice. I hope it makes a difference in your life. I hope this causes you to think. I hope it causes you to feel. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe on Spotify, subscribe on Apple, leave us a positive review. Leave us a negative review, but make sure the negative review comes with 5 stars, because people pay attention to that stuff. Share this with a friend. If you have a friend who's sort of stuck and is spinning and wants love but isn't taking action on it, isn't doing anything differently, let this be words of inspiration to her. I don't flatter myself that I'm some sort of inspirational guru or anything like that. That is not the card that I'm playing. If anything, I'm someone who's had the same fears, the same ambivalence, the same frustration with dating online, cycling through a whole bunch of people. It can wear you down. That's why you need support. That's why you need a community. That's why you need someone to help guide you. That is my mission in life. Outside of my family, that's what I do. If you find yourself inspired, if you want to take action, if you find you're spinning, if you find you're bound by fear and don't trust your own judgment, go to evanmarckatz.com/now. Book a time to talk with me. When you book that time to talk with me, it's not going to take you to a calendar at this point in time. It will take you to a wait list. I will be in touch with you sooner rather than later. You just can't book a time on my calendar because I'm kind of on summer break. In the meantime, I love you. I appreciate you. I thank you for being a part of my community of the Love You podcast. And I look forward to our next conversation next week. It's going to be a doozy.